Hello everyone and welcome back to the University of Dallas Track and Field Team of the 2010s Team of the Decade. I'm Kevin McGurk and thank you so much for joining us for our final segment of the Track and Field Team of the Decade. It's been a long journey, but we're closing in on the end and we'll be wrapping up with our final episode today. As I will now reintroduce my partner and co-host for this project for the final time, Matt Barber.
How's it going?
Doing all right. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good.
So it's been a long journey of filming and talking about all of this and speculating and stats and numbers and I don't know. I've had a lot of fun with this project. What's been your biggest thought on this whole Team of the Decade?
Well, just something we reiterated a couple of times. Just over a large swath of time, the high quality of athletes that we've had come through here is, I don't know, it's impressive considering the size of the program. A very small team.
So, as we take a brief second to review, so what has been your favorite segment as we've looked at all the different parts of the team, running, jumping, throwing, speculating, relays? What was your most looked forward to segment coming in, and then after we've obviously done all of them already and talked about them, what has been your favorite post segment?
Well, definitely going in, it was the relays, because I think it's the most fun to speculate, putting together different individual legs of a relay, so you end up more, obviously this whole team that we're putting together is a combination of athletes from 2010 to 2019, but it's most obvious when you have a relay team and you get 3 athletes from 3 different teams together, or 4 athletes from 4 different teams. So that was definitely the most fun going in, and it was probably the most fun I had on an individual episode, was talking about and looking at the relays, but also the mid and long distance runners, because you have a wide representation. We have some of our best athletes were from 2019 with Anna Wilgenbush, and then back 2010 with Greg Piparunas, and we have a really large window of people represented there too. So I know that was another really fun couple episodes.
I thought my favorite going in was obviously the one where we'd be talking about me with the hurdles.
Oh, okay.
But honestly, I think the one, maybe the 2 I actually had the most fun talking about was actually not the hurdles, was probably jumps and throws.
Yeah.
I think I actually like talking about our jumpers and throwers a little bit more because it's such a different team with the jumpers and the throwers, especially when you consider that probably half of that team are non-solo track people.
Yeah, they're all doing sport. Well, I guess not all of, but a lot of them are. Yeah, they always added the most character, I guess, because your distance runners are pretty similar no matter what school you look at, or kind of the skinny, short dudes going around running 10, 12 miles. They have similar geeky humor, of which I participated. But yeah, I agree. There's a lot of fun going through the jumpers and the throwers.
Because if you think about it, we have 4 and 4 times 2, so we had 16 slots for jumpers and throwers.
Yeah. We
had 2 for men's jumps were Darius and Tanner, both basketball players. Mm-hmm. We had 2 for the women's jumps, Shelby and Helen, who were both women's basketball players. And then all of the girls' throwing selections were originally non-track people, with Diana and Jules with volleyball and women's basketball. So it's very one.
Yeah.
So over half the jumpers and throwers were dual sport athletes.
Yep. Honorable mention to the basketball teams and the volleyball team.
Yeah, the honorable mention articles, if anyone hasn't read those, you should go look at those. We had 6 honorable mentions for athletes, and then 3 programs.
Did we shout out the soccer too?
Yeah, the whole basketball program, men's and women's, men's soccer, and volleyball.
There we go. Yep.
So 4 teams, 3 programs, and 6 honorable mention athletes who we will segue into now. Just a brief mention of our honorable mentions. So on the men's side, we had Ryan McInerney in the 8:15 and 5K, Clinton Hayer in the 800, Luciano Villanueva in the 4x100, and Kevin Doherty in the 3,000 meter steeplechase. Our selections. And so Ryan is obviously someone we've talked about a lot. It seemed like we had to get him in here somehow.
Oh, definitely. There's no way to do this without, and I still waffle on that 5K choice. You know, he was such so close to the cut on 3 events. But yeah.
Yeah, if you look at his numbers, he's in the top 3 for the decade in the 15 and the 5K, and then he's in the top 4. He's one of 4 athletes under 2 minutes for the 800. Yeah, just all around a great middle distance and long distance athlete.
And then had the speed as a middle long distance athlete to be a part of multiple 4x4s and a 4x1 medal teams.
So wasn't able to. There's always somebody better. There was always someone better in each individual event.
Yeah.
But as a whole, Ryan McInerney honorably mentioned for 3 events, and again he's also the most decorated athlete at UD with those 7 SCAC medals. So I mean, it's congratulations, Ryan, for being honorably mentioned. Sorry we couldn't actually get you onto the team, but you should have run faster. Also, another big friend of yours, Clinton Hayer, 800 meter selection.
Clinton Hayer.
Hashtag
higher quality runner.
So this is the first time we've talked about Ryan a lot. We don't need to rehash his backstory, but we haven't. This is the first time we're mentioning Clinton. So tell us a little bit about Clinton.
Well, our biggest accomplishment together was I started the 4x4 and I handed off to him because he was our 800 specialist. And at conference 2012, I think through 2 legs, we were in second in 2000. It was a very competitive conference that year. I know it was at Birmingham. I don't remember the rest of the schools in the conference because I remember there was a big split. Some of them left. But it was a really big field. All 8, filled out in the finals. And we were second through 2 legs, the 2 of us. So we were a silver medalist team that year. And our 3rd leg tripped on the back stretch up in that front pack. And he was behind the throwing cages. We couldn't see who tripped him, but he says one of the guys knocked him out. I don't know from what school. But
On the track or off the track?
No, he landed on the track. He tumbled and got up, and he was behind the whole rest of the pack. But by the time he got it to our 4th leg, we were screwed. But Clinton, fun fact about his running career, at UD he never ran 2 minutes in the 800. You would go from 201, 202, 203, and it would jump down to 159. Fun fact, never ran 2 minutes in 800.
Did he have an aversion to round numbers?
At conference, he just would rather run faster than slower, so he figured skip the 2 minute.
All right. Well, our the next honorable mention, we mentioned Luciano Villanueva, another dual sport athlete, also played baseball at UD, which is very surprising that he also did track because baseball goes on at the same time.
It's spring, yeah.
So it still baffles me. Like, okay, how did you manage to actually compete in both when they're at the same time? So
And that's the problem. If you look at his, I think that's why he ended up as an honorable mention for the relay, because he's one of the fastest guys to ever come out for the team. But you look at his career, I think it was 2 meets, maybe a 3rd meet.
yeah, two meets.
Two meets total. It's just he was in spring season. He didn't have time to come out too much. When he did, he was exceptional. But I mean, it's if the project that we're doing here is in the seasons that they competed, who would have been the best athlete per event, and it's like the season that he competed, he was busy with baseball, and I think the other guys on the relay squad would have had a better chance of getting the baton off. I just don't know if he would have had time to practice the same as everybody else, even though he was an exceptional runner, and I think he deserves merit. He merits being a mention here.
And so our last honorable mention for the men's team, the 3,000 meter steeplechase, Kevin Doherty.
Yep.
Kevin Doherty and Joe Kilmer were, this was one of the events where we had to talk about this a little bit because they're almost exactly identical as far as their times.
Yeah.
And we mentioned this back during the hurdle segment, but I think it bears repeating. Just what at the time when we were discussing it, what ultimately led to the decision that we picked Kilmer over Doherty.
Well, it's a couple of things. I don't remember the exact times. I don't have it pulled up, but
I think it was 10:21:84 for Kilmer and 10:21:31 for Kevin.
So Kevin's, I think that was his 5th or 6th steeplechase at the end of his 2nd year doing track. Kilmer, that was his 2nd ever time doing steeplechase. Both PRs came at conference. If you look at Kilmer's first ever steeplechase, I think it was maybe 10 to 15 seconds faster than Kevin's first ever time. If you look at their career and how they run, they're very similar. I think I mentioned this before. They were both dual sport athletes in high school. They both play a lot of pickup basketball, tennis, whatever, other stuff on the side. Both taller, more athletic for distance runners, for guys. And they both transitioned well because of that athleticism into steeplechase with the barriers. But Kilmer had a faster mile time, almost 10 seconds faster. In the 5K, the difference between the two PRs was narrower than the mile time, even though it's a longer distance event. And Kevin edged him, but maybe about 8 seconds, 6 seconds, something like that.
That I don't know off the top of my head.
And it was really close, and you just look at 2 ever times running it, half a second behind Kevin after having run it for 5 or 6 times 2 years. So we just gave the nod to Kilmer.
That wraps up on the men's side. So on the women's side, we had 2 selections. We had Colleen Slattery and Sarah Valdivinos.
Mm-hmm.
Colleen, much like Ryan, was a top 3 athlete at UD in several events: 800, steeplechase, high jump. But also like Ryan, there was always someone who was either better, either statistically, or in the case of high jump, we thought that the consistency of Antonella warranted the pick.
Yeah.
And then we mentioned Colleen a few times, but you competed with her in 12 and 13, and was her coach in 15. So just tell us a little bit, just kind of to reiterate a little bit about Colleen.
She's an excellent teammate. I mean, she was, I think, cross-country track captain of her junior and senior year. Super consistent, always brought the right mentality to practice, always stepped up to whichever event there was an opportunity to score in, and you saw that. Depending on the year, she would high jump, or she did a multi one year. I think I wasn't here. I think it was the 2014 season, and her ability to contribute in a lot of different events. She specialized more 800 mile. Obviously 4x4 steeplechase as well, but just her ability to step in wherever the team needed her to score.
And I think it's just also funny, we were talking last week with the speculation episode, we're speculating that Colleen's best event probably would have been steeplechase if that was the event that she focused in.
That's what I think, yeah.
But I think it's actually kind of funny because we then, to be fair to our selection for steeplechase, Bridget Kennedy, we discussed, well, if both of them had the ideal careers, who would still be better? And it was your opinion that it would be Bridget. So I just think it's funny that even with Colleen focusing in an event, there's still somebody's better.
Yeah, and that's why she's a perfect honorable mention. She's just almost there in a bunch of different events.
So the last honorable mention, Sarah Valdivinos, selected for the 4x100 meter relay. Did not miss being in the 4x100 team by much. I mean, she has an almost identical PR to Katie Wizawati, 1377 to 1378.
Yeah.
So, we did mention her briefly back during the relay episode, but just to go over it again, what went into the pick that was ultimately Lauren Zammit over Sarah for that spot?
Well, I think Katie Wizawati and Sarah were both on the same medaling team for the 4x1, coincidentally.
I think we have that here somewhere, I think.
It's somewhere in there. But
4x1,
Yeah.
and then we have JD. Yep, they were both on the same team.
yeah, it's similar with Sarah, where she excelled in a couple of different events, like the 100. You look at her PR in the 100 hurdles. You look at I don't remember what her PR was in the 4 hurdles either, but she had some notable times. But she wasn't necessarily super consistent. There would be meets where she would run 4 or 5 seconds slower, and it was tough to figure out why. Her peak, she's definitely on that relay team. She had talent for days. I think she also was on the list of all-time events competed in. We had her compete in a number of different kinds of events. She's just super athletic. She could jump, she could hurdle, she could sprint. Obviously was on the relays. So she's another tough miss, but I went with a more, again, this is me like coaching it, like definitely going to get the baton off, definitely going to compete like this on the day of. I went for Lauren with that last spot.
And both with just notable facts for tidbits for Colleen and Sarah. When I was prepping for today's episode, Colleen, 13 different events competed in, and Sarah also competed in every single event that, except for the 60-meter hurdles, an indoor event, competed in every single event that ran 1 lap or less. So
versatility among these two honorable mentions.
So those are the all-decade honorable mentions. So we have, in addition to our 40 events, our 33 athletes selected, we add another 6 to the total. So 39 distinct athletes on the all-decade team for either the actual selections or the honorably mentioned selections.
Yeah.
But there's also one. So 2 things before we move on. So kind of another speculative instance. We do not actually have official multi-events like the decathlon, heptathlon, or the pentathlon for the Team of the Decade, since no one ever really competed in it at UD. It's not something that we ever really had the ability to do. None of the meets that we've ever gone to have really had it, whether indoor or outdoor, except for the one that Colleen did. But if you were going to pick from the athlete pool of the decade, if you're going to pick your theoretical decathlete or heptathlete for indoor for the men, and the heptathlon or indoor, the pentathlon for the women, who would be your picks?
Well, again, unofficially, I mean, it's Colleen, just because she demonstrated an ability to compete in a lot of events and actually did a multi-event once in 2014, I think. And then we've talked about this off the screen, but then you're the other pick for the guys because of the sprinting, the hurdling, the jumping, and the throwing. You have the most diverse event record, so it would be you and Colleen.
So, yeah, it's always a I really did want to do that decathlon, but it's just pole vault was always the thing that got in the way because
It takes a lot of time.
Yeah, I don't really know how to pole vault. I think I worked with Coach Cato twice, and it was just basic. Just put the pole down and just just do the basic opening drill, and that's all that we did. And so the other thing is, we haven't selected a coach for the all-decade team.
Whoa. Well, I mean, what is it? It's Buhorn. No, who coached before? So it was Dory Madeir, Matt Buhorn, myself, and then
2019. Coach Nick didn't come in until 2020.
So okay, so Coach Nick. So it's Coach Dory Madeir, Coach Harry Hall, Coach Matt Buhorn, and myself. I coached 5 years. That's half a decade. So I think,
yeah, I'm pretty sure. And you were the coach when Prince and Diana and myself won our medals, and when Anna broke onto the scene, and I think it's fair to say that it's a safe pick. You're the coach of the decade.
All right, I got another nomination on the all-decade team.
And so interesting. Who's the all-decade assistant coach?
Assistant coach?
Specifically of the assistant coaches that you have had.
Yes, yeah. Coach Price, Alicia Price. She was the throws program for 3 years, and then because of Paolo was the holdover, was kind of the captain keeping the throws team going. Coach Price is there for 3 years and just bolsters that group. Diana starts winning medals. Paolo and Marcos are there scoring or setting school records. Jules comes on to the scene with this group. A number of others they had a large group. There was depth too. And then after she left, we still had such a good group. We kind of were able to establish a throws program. I think Coach Price for all that she did for that group that otherwise we wouldn't have had, a throws program to speak of.
Now, I mean, I'm very definitely biased, but for me, it would have been Coach Logan. With Coach Marlin being a very close second.
Yeah, whoever you worked with. Definitely.
No disrespect to Coach Cato, but I work much more closely with Coach Logan and Coach Marlin.
Yeah, if I have to pick between Logan and Cato, that gets harder, and Coach Marlin. But I just, for a program that we probably otherwise wouldn't have had, I'm just really thankful for all that Coach Price did, and I think that's who I would roll with.
All right, well, on to our wrap-up of the speculation that we held off on last time. So the all-time 4x4, the super speculative 4x4 team, and I say super speculative because we are using the what-if version of not only Prince, but the what-if version of myself. Mm-hmm. If Prince, based on his calculated 200 time, actually achieved his projected 400 time, and if I had gotten to the point that that you and Coach Marlin and others said that I theoretically should have been able to get to in the 400 and the 400 hurdles. So that's why it's super speculative, because it's going a little bit beyond what is and what's probable into what's ideal and
what
perfect.
Could. Yeah.
And so if you look at, we'll show you the numbers on screen. We have a little bit of a range of numbers ranging from 313 to 314, depending on how conservative or ambitious we want to be on the calculated numbers.
Yeah.
But all time going back to 1974, which according to the research I was able to do, seems to be the beginning of Division III championships for outdoor track and field. In that time, now in the however many years this turns out to be, somewhere around 40 years or so, our most conservative guess of our super speculative 4x4 team with you, Barton, myself, and Prince. That super speculative, the most conservative of the bunch, would have been NCAA champion, D3 champions 3 times, with 3 silver medals, 3 bronze medals, and at least and 3 years where we don't make All-American. And there are a couple of unknowns because the records didn't show the top 8, so I didn't want to assume that we would have gotten there. We probably could have, but
yeah. So
there's maybe 5 years where we don't make All-American out of somewhere between 1974 and 2019. The middle group, the 31350, obviously a little better. 6 championships, 1 silver, 7 bronze, and only 1 year where we don't make All-American, with a couple of unknowns. So possibly up to 3. And then the most ambitious of the bunch, 7 championships, 3 silver, 7 bronze, and All-American every single year. So That would have been a pretty damn good team.
If only we got the best possible version of our 4 best potential 400 runners from this decade. that would have been wild, but yeah.
So what
Not
is
likely.
So what is, again, it's super speculative.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
So what is all of those numbers tell you then about the 4 of us?
I mean, they just we had guys with high speed peaks, you know, like obviously we're adding in Prince from our actually 4x4 selection because we know his 200 speed, and if you look at what he could do as a sub 22 second 200 runner, we know that translates into a 400. You'd have to change the way you trained and everything, but then you do the best possible version of you, Barton, and myself on top of that. I mean, that's wild.
Yeah, so let it not be said that we don't have good athletes on the track and
There you
field team. Because as these numbers show, our super amalgamated 4x4 team would have been, even at our worst, would have still won national championships in some years.
Yeah, so we would have been competed at least.
So, and I just think that's really cool, and it's just a shame that we're not Hercules and Achilles, and we're not immortal, and we're not time travelers.
Yeah, if only we had those things. That's all we need. What we need.
I mean, it's UD. I mean, would it be with how much UD studies the classics? I mean, is it too much to ask to be Hercules?
You know what? As someone closing in on 30, we can't ask for Achilles problems. I've seen that. I've seen that with people, but
Well, we'll leave
I
it
don't
at
know about
that.
Achilles the hero. Yeah.
We'll leave it at that then. All right, so kind of the wrap up for this whole thing. So looking at the all-decade team as a whole, we have all 40 slots. Like I said, 30 different distinct athletes selected for the team. As you look at our team numbers, so start off with the men's team. You look at the point totals and our, between the actual totals and some of the events where we speculate, this athlete could have been better and this would have been their speculative theoretical data and such, but sticking with the actual as it is data. You look at the 10 years of the conference and, those first couple of years we weren't in the SCAC in 10 and 11, much bigger conferences, 10, 12 teams, something like that. But still, I have in my notes, I have 10 teams here. So still would have, in those first couple of years, would have finished 5th out of 10. And I don't think that doesn't seem too terrible to me, especially when you consider this is just all of our best people. This isn't even, all of this extra data doesn't, for the other teams, factors in, their second and third and fourth and fifth, all scoring positions. This literally is just the 33 people we have picked.
Yeah.
So if we had thrown, if we had, our second and third and fourth best people in, the 1 and the 2 and high jump and everything, obviously these point totals go up a bit. But as such, I mean, most years we finish 3rd, and most of that is the 2 teams ahead of us are TLU and Trinity.
Yeah.
So
that checks out. Yeah.
which, actually looking at the numbers, the actual total point average for the men's team totals up to about 100 points, and TLU and Trinity almost routinely score over 200. So it's.
But again, a big part of that is depth at every position that they have. So, we're fine, like if we have our decade team competing, we're competing with their top athletes in these different events. But then they also have somebody else a little bit behind that top athlete that's coming in 3rd or 4th. So that's typically how they had such dominance. They were deep in a lot of positions.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, our conference has been relatively small for most of the decade, but I mean, still being the next best team behind TLU and Trinity doesn't seem to be too bad. And so we also take a look at the girls team, fairly similar numbers as the girls team, a little bit lower in the point totals, as their total point average comes out to about 88 points, and they still have a fairly similar look to what the men's team would have looked like. You know, they finished third most of the time. They also finished fourth a lot of the time. It's actually equal third and fourth 4 times each. But I think the most impressive one would have been in 2010. Out of the 10 teams, that was one of their 4th places.
Yeah.
So as we look at these numbers for both the men's team and the girls' team on how they would stack up against the SCAC, what is all these numbers tell you?
Just, I mean, nothing different than when we started to observe in the middle of this project that our top athletes are going to be able to compete for high scoring point spots in the standings. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4. But that in a fully fleshed out conference setting, the depth required from some of the top teams in the conference, whether it's a Trinity and a TLU and whoever else, you know, was really good in those in the pre-2012 time frame. The depth really helps the track. And so our all-decade team is going to compete for each individual spot, but we're just going to lose down the ballot. And that's how in 2013, when our women's team was 2nd overall, then when Antonella scored her 23.5 points in conference, that's what we did. Is we had people like Colleen, like Antonella, like whoever else, competing in multiple events downstream and collecting points that way. If you get 4 more athletes in 6th place, each getting a point each, that helps.
And so, speaking of Colleen and Antonella, as we transition to some of the more specifics, as you can see on screen, the list here, the best conference performances on points all time. Out of the top 10, only Colleen, you know, not an official selection for one of the events, is a top 5 scorer all time in an individual conference. Mm-hmm. And you know, you put that together with Antonella, the 2 of them scored 40 points.
Yep.
At the same meet.
Yep.
So that seemed like, as you're talking about with depth, like if that team actually had a few more athletes on it, I'd have to actually check the numbers because I didn't think to look this up. But could that have been a conference championship team with a little bit more, a little bit more depth to it?
I don't think so. I think that year it was a duke 'em out for 2nd place. I think Trinity ran away with the team gold, I guess, that year. Now, if we add in all of our decade people for depth, I don't know. But yeah, I think that was a duke 'em out for 2nd place that year.
Okay, but it's still impressive. You had 2 people in our top 10
yeah.
all time scoring in a single conference were teammates,
yeah.
and also directly competed against each other in a lot of events,
including the high jump, which we had to pick between them for.
Yeah. They were both in high jump. They're both in triple jump. I think they were both in javelin. Yeah. And so then you have yourself, you have Prince, you have me, we have you again, we have Katie McIntyre, we have Tanner, which was a little bit, when I was putting this together, was almost surprising that Tanner got all these points. I mean, when you actually break it down, it makes sense. I mean, he was in a lot of field events and he scored in, I think, every one of them. But it's just one of those things that kind of flies under the radar. Like, you don't expect a basketball player to score so many points. And then Barton, and then Diana. So looking at the conference point totals, which one of those is? I mean, for me, it's definitely Tanner. But out of all of those, which is the most surprising that they are on this list with as many points as they have?
Well, we established this already. I remember looking at this when I was looking through your show notes, just like a couple of months ago when we were starting this project. The one that stood out to me the most was Antonella, because I knew she was strong in a couple of events, but I don't remember. I was at this meet. I don't remember her scoring 23.5 points. I knew that she scored a bunch of points for the team. I knew she was in a number of events, but I don't remember her crushing hit like this. So that was the one that really jumped off the page to me, and same with Colleen, because that was the same meet. But yeah, those two really jumped off the page.
And then you're on there twice.
Yeah, that was junior and senior years.
And I believe, if I remember, I have the point totals here somewhere. I believe out of all the athletes that have come through UD, you actually have the highest total accumulated conference points with 39, a little bit ahead of Ryan at 35.5.
Yeah.
So I guess even though he has one more medal than you, you can always hold over him that you've scored more points than he has.
There we go.
And so one of the other things, I just wanted to mention this briefly because this was another thing that I found interesting. So we've had four athletes who have scored in 5 different events at conference. They are myself, you, Antonella, and Colleen. And out of all of them, the one that impresses me the most is is Antonella, because all of hers were individual events. All the rest of us, we had at least one relay on there.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, I remember at Conference 2019, when I was going for the high hurdles, because that was after I'd already gotten the bronze in jav. It was a foregone conclusion that I was going to medal in the 400 hurdles. Obviously, we didn't know which color it was going to be, but it was a foregone conclusion that I was getting a medal. And I remember Coach Cato saying something like, if I could get 3 medals, because the high hurdles was the one that was kind of iffy. I didn't think I was probably going to get it because that was before I found my stride. And so, but I remember him saying that if I could get 3 medals individual medals in one conference, he would be really impressed. And so the same holds true, in my opinion, with Antonella, because it is really hard to be good at 1 or 2 events in track, let alone being able to score in 5.
Yeah.
So that one, I don't know about you, but that's the one that impresses me the most out of the 4 of us.
Yeah.
And so, were you surprised? So when I first mentioned this back in August or September, whenever it was that a surprise to you that we've had several athletes able to score in 5 events at conference?
I mean, I guess it makes sense. Like, I wouldn't think of anyone off the top of my head other than maybe, like, even before this project, I wouldn't have immediately thought of Antonella. But, Antonella, Colleen, you, in my head makes sense. I forgot that I was 3 sprinting events and both relays. I was the least diverse in that group. All of mine were just sprints. There was no hurdles. There was no, jumping. There was no throwing. But I guess so, yeah, it makes sense.
They have 22 medalists with 13 distinct medals. They had 13 medals won, 3 relays. For all decade medals won in the SCAC. The men's team for the decade have won 44. There have been 44 medals won. If you make them all distinct, since quite a lot of them were relays, there were 6 relays. If you make those all distinct races, the total is 25. And on the girls' side, they have 22 medalists with 13 distinct medals. They had 13 medals won, 3 relays. And so you obviously have a lot of repeating names on the men's side. You know, Ryan had 7 medals, you had 6 medals, Barton had 4, Prince had 4. And on the girls' side, you know, the highest repeating number is Katie McIntyre with 4, with the most anyone else only had 2. What led to the men's team just being able to have so many more medalists and medals won than the girls' team?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is it's overall, on a year-to-year basis, they had better athletes. Not overall in any individual one event, but there are just more guys up at the top.
I'm assuming it makes a difference that you have people like yourself, like Ryan, like Prince, you know, who were on the team for 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah, it definitely does. So you look at, you know, the highest medaling for the girls, like, you know, Colleen is one we've mentioned, all the years on the team. Diana had 2 years. Michelle DeRoche had 2 medals. She was here her whole time. Hannah Green, her 2 medals were in her first 2 years. Katie, obviously, every year was on the team. Sarah, with her 1 medal, was on the team every year. So, you know, the girls that are represented are traditionally the ones that were here for multiple seasons, if not all 4 years. So, yeah, it definitely makes a difference. Then you also get, you know, a 1-year athlete like Tanner getting his medal in here as well. So.
And so, is there anyone on either the men's team or the women's team that you totally forgot that they actually won medals?
I don't think so.
No surprises?
No, let me skim again, but all of these make sense. Being at most of these meets, I remember being pumped for each of these people. Will Shavy, maybe, in the discus. I remember he threw disc in javelin. I forgot he medaled in disc. That might be the only one that jumps off the page like that.
Well, we also have a little bit more numbers. So on the men's team, there are 19 distinctly different medaling athletes who have gotten medals on the decade. 10 are on the all-decade team. And on the girls' side, 13 distinct medaling athletes with 8 of them on the all-decade team. And I actually was a little bit surprised by both of those numbers because I thought it would be closer to 80 or 90% rather than around 50%.
Well, similar to the total number of medals handed out versus distinctive events medaled in, a lot of that comes just from relays. Like we're picking the best ever 4 for a relay as opposed to, you know, each individual relay team, which included 4 people each time. So I think a lot of that just comes from weeding out other people on the relays.
All right, and so as we, you know, wrap this up, you know, on the men's side, 2 golds, 8 silvers, and 15 bronze medals. This again distinctly different for the 25, and on the girls' side, 1 gold, 7 silvers, and 5 bronze for the 13 differently distinct medals. You know, total of 9 different medaling relay teams. I think that just reinforces, I think, what you've said a few times, that we've had some good clusters of athletes year to year. And that obviously shows in the 9 relays. Interesting, both teams only have 1 silver, but a lot of bronze medals in there as well. And you know, how big is it? You know, how personally important is it to athletes to actually, even if it is only a relay medal and it isn't a, you know, I did this solely on my own, you know, you obviously have to have help, but how important is it for athletes to actually get a medal?
Oh, it's simultaneously not important at all and also everything, because can you say I ran my best today and I ran a big PR and I got 4th, but whatever, I was better than I'd ever been before? Yes, you can say that, and it's very true, especially if you have another year to build on. It's like, okay, awesome. let's build on that and get a gold next year. Because you want that representation of like, who are you competing against? Did you beat them? Like the example that I used before in the other show, probably a relay show, where one of the times we were talking about Ryan McNaney, but the school record in the 4x4 when we ran 3:28 at conference, we got 4th place. It's our school record, and they should be incredibly proud of that. But I remember him, he was our anchor, and when we finished, and we came in 4th. It's hard to console him. It's hard to console that team saying, "Look, we broke the school record." They're like, "Yeah, but we're not on the podium." So it's simultaneously not important at all, but then also everything, because it is a representation of like, this is sport. No matter how good you are, if you can't beat the Golden State Warriors when they're winning 73 games in a year in the finals, like, you didn't win. So I don't know. Like, it was really important to me. There were guys faster than me that have come on the team since, but the ability for me to get the medals in my year was super, super important to me too.
And so, out of all of your 6 medals, your 2 200s, your 2 400s, and your 2 relay medals, which one is the nearest and dearest to you?
Well, like individually, I recognize probably the 200 from my junior year. I think it was my most impressive time. It came down to I almost won gold. The reason I say that is because I almost won gold. They had to go back and look at the finish again. If you go in on TFRS now, it just says 41 and 22.40 and 22.41, and they had me lose by 100th of a second, but it was closer than that on the printout list. It was closer than that, and I think the fact that I was this close to a gold, literally like a hair away, that was probably my most impressive. But the one that means the most to me is definitely the 4x4 the following year, senior year, because for me, it's more representative of the team aspect of the sport, running with 3 other guys, trying to beat another group of 4 guys, and coming in and getting bronze with a group. The year before we didn't really have strong relays. Like we almost did in the 4x4, the 4x1, nothing. The 4x4, we fell apart. With third leg falling over and everything. It was our chance at revenge, and we came back and we got on the podium. So probably the relay senior year.
I think for me, it's hard for me to decide, but either the bronze in javelin or the bronze for 4x1 that we won in 2018. It's almost kind of surprising that my favorite one isn't the gold medal in the 400 hurdles, but I mean, maybe I rephrase that. It is my favorite one, but it's not the one that means the most to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Because both instances were very similar of just the pure joy of realizing that, holy cow, I just won a medal in both javelin and the 4x1. Mm-hmm. So I'd have a very difficult time picking between them. If you forced me to pick, I might have to say the relay. But that I also might instantly take that back and say, no, it's actually the javelin. It's very close. It's like 51-49. So as we come towards the end, so we've had 33 athletes selected to the team and 6 honorable mentions. Who do you think, as just pure athletes, who do you think of the 33 to 39 athletes on the all-decade team, who do you think are the best of the best? The best of the best of the decade?
In my head, I think of 2 men and 2 women. So on the men's side, I think of Prince and I think of Greg Piv, as far as just sheer excellence in their field and what they were able to bring to the team and drag other people with them. Obviously in the 100, 200, and Greg, and the 800 and the 1500, and then on the women's side, Katie Mack and Diana. Those are definitely kind of like the 2 men and the 2 women I think of as just top of the top of the top. Obviously, there are plenty of others that merit being mentioned, including yourself, including Anna Wilgenbush. If we were to keep going down the list, but I don't know. Really, impressive group, especially there at the top where you can count. If you look at the history of the conference, whatever, like we did during the project, like they're going to medal every year. So it's an impressive group, especially there.
Mentioning Greg again actually reminded me. I promised this weeks ago and almost forgot to include this. But if you look at so two things really quickly before we come back. Two things really quickly. So you look at, again, the 33 distinct athletes. We have 5 men and 5 women who were picked multiple times, as we'll show you the list here. Everyone from Katie McIntyre through Katie Wizawati. And we've had, on the one-ofs, we've had 11 different men individually picked for one-ofs and 12 different women individually picked for one-ofs. But also, as you can also see, when we were talking to Greg several weeks ago, I said that I knew his 15 and his 800 were close to the best times, some of the best point averages scored. Well, as you can see, we'll show you the exact numbers here on screen. And his 1500 was the 4th best individual event of the decade at 8.1 points, and his 800 was the 8th best at 7.2 points. So as we very briefly look at all of these different numbers here, does any of these surprise you, or is this just again now that I kind of already figured all of this?
Well, just from the conversations we've had, about your 400 hurdle, Diana's shot put, Prince's 2, Greg's mile and 800. Some of these fit into place now, after we've done the project. But yes.
So we're wrapping up the best athletes of the decade. Obviously, I did not have the privilege of competing and knowing everybody. Obviously, only getting here in 2017. But of the people you mentioned, I did obviously compete with 3 of them, with Katie and Diana and Prince. And I think there are also a lot of, like we mentioned Tomas last week. We mentioned, we've talked about Darius's high jump potential and stuff. Obviously, we've had a lot of great athletes who just, for one reason or another, weren't able to do more with the track team, which, from trying to win a conference championship point of view, is, well, we're never going to beat Trinity anyway, but it was still very sad. Actually, because TLU's been running the conference the last few years, so changed that from Trinity to TLU. Except on the girls' side, Trinity's girls are still better than TLU's girls. But tangent aside, having the ability and the privilege of knowing such great athletes like Prince, like Diana, like Katie, like Darius, like Anna Wilgenbush, all these other athletes. It's been a very humbling and honorable. It's been an honor to compete with all of them. But just of the people that I've competed with, I would definitely agree that the best of the decades, Prince, Diana, Katie, Anna, it's a good group. All right, well, we'll now bring back one more time our favorite 100-meter and 200-meter runner from the team of the decade, Prince Giadalor. Prince, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me again.
It's always a pleasure to have you on. So we've obviously talked about a lot of things. We've talked about your times in the Open, 100 and 200. We've talked about relay times. now we're talking a little bit about what ifs at this point, and the big what if that we discovered during this project was the what if you took your 200 and projected what your 400 could have been in the most ideal of scenarios, and we made the very interesting discovery that your 400 time would have been very, very fast. Projected at 48.46 seconds. And so, is that something that you ever thought, just ever thought of yourself, of how fast could my 400 have been?
It's astounding to look at the statistics, and it's some great analytical work that you've done, Kevin. I think that there very well could have been a future for myself in the 400-meter dash, although I may have needed to drop about 15 to 20 additional pounds that I ran my 21.8 at.
So overall, in 100% speculatively, if your projected time of 48.46 had come true, you would have won 26 times out of 28 years for the 400, with a silver in 2018 and a bronze in 2019. And those two medals would have been behind the top 3 to date times in the SCAC, behind Marquise Brown, Blair Walker, and Connor Thompson. And I just wanted to know what your reaction to that is.
Surprised, quite frankly, to be in the same category as Marquise, as a 400 runner. But, I think that the 400 is something that may have been explored more if I was a full-time track athlete. I was a two-sport athlete. But hear those statistics is astounding. And, I'm curious to hear Coach Barber's thoughts.
Oh, that would have been a lot of fun. I mean, that's not, barely clipping 48 in a relay like I did. That's full on in an open, just based on what you did in the 200. So that would have been a lot of fun. We're talking about going to, last chance meets, for the 1 or the 200. I think that 400 projection puts you much closer nationally to actually, getting up there and qualifying. I don't know in a given year what would have happened, but that would have been fun for sure.
And so the other half of this is, well, if you're that good, projected time is that good in the 400, how would that do if we plugged you into the 4x4, which we already knew from the project how good our 4x4 team would have been with Martin Holdridge, Greg Pivarunas, Coach Barber, and myself. But then you take out the fourth in that group, which would have been Greg, and you put in your projected 400 time. And we also, one thing that Barber and I have talked about during this project is if my projected 400 hurdle time had ever happened, and also the 400 time that would have necessarily would have had to have accompanied it, we plugged all of those times in together, our super speculative, our perfect ideal 4x4 team of the 3 of us and Barton Holdridge. And if you look at the numbers, that would have been quite a great team. If you look at from 1974, at the first year of the Division III NCAA track and field, all the way through 2019, in the range of times, we would have won anywhere from 3 to 7 championships. We would have medaled a lot of other bronze and silvers in a lot of times in those years, and almost every single year, regardless of the time, would have been an All-American time. And I mean, we talked, Barbara and I talked about this earlier, but man, I wish we had time travel and, you know, all of these things actually occurred, because that would have been some fun times.
And I'll fill in the color for you a little bit, because so you take Barton and I, who were more full-time 400 guys. Anyone who's run a 4x4 knows this. The 4x4 speeds you up because you don't have to do your block start. You can take a couple of steps, get some speed going. When you get the baton, you're already fast. And Barton and I, at the end of our seasons at SCAC, would split high 48s, low 49s, whereas in the opens, we were always 50 point. You know, you can speed yourself up a little bit. So we took your projected, and then we put you getting the baton with momentum. And obviously it's speculative for all of us. We have to each run our best season, but that, like, theoretically, with athletes from UD's history, like from this decade, we would have been could have competed at a national level. And I, didn't anticipate that going into the project to find something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that's something you might be interested to know, in addition to the speculative 400 numbers. And also, obviously, none of us have made it to a national competition, but how great would that have been had we been able to pull something like that off?
That would have been amazing. I think that it's also a testament to, over the years, with Coach Barber being a star in the program, and eventually getting down to myself being a star in the program, and also yourself even shining and taking the baton forward in the track program, is that University of Dallas has had very good athletes come through it. And I think that says a lot, given the rigor of University of Dallas, and definitely thinking about those graduates that graduated today, walked today, and walked for grad school, completing grad school and things of that nature. I just think that, despite the fact that University of Dallas is a books first school, a very well-known, rigorous institution, you had students that were great all-around students, and great athletes and performers.
And so, as we wrap up our Team of the Decade project, what has been your favorite thing to recall and remember as we've looked back over the collective history of UD track and field throughout the 2010s, not only as a team collectively, but with every individual person? What has been your favorite thing to remember?
As a team collectively, I think my favorite moment was that prayer before our eventual record-breaking 4x1 performance, and that breakout session when I told my teammates, I told you guys, just give me the baton and I'll take care of the rest. And to be able to then, during the race, get the baton and catch a few schools and ultimately land us that medal and shatter that school record was special. From an individual standpoint, it's incredible to know just the magnitude of Marquise and I's performance that day, specifically that day in the SCAC in 2016, specifically during the 200-meter dash, and knowing just how many gold medals I would have won with that time, and just to really understand with analytics that you provided. That was one of the greatest performances in SCAC history. That was extremely special as well.
As we bring this to a close, you also had a birthday recently, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yes, my birthday. I turned 25 this past Friday.
Well, Prince, happy birthday. And I already texted you, but I have to do this officially now. So happy birthday again.
Thank you again.
Welcome to the quarter century.
Really appreciate that.
All right, so we come to the end of our all-decade project. Do you have any final thoughts?
Just that the value that teams play in any individual person's life competing in sport, but like for me, all of these names, I know all of these faces, some better than others, all of them well because we were on the same team together. Just what a great privilege it is to know all these people. So some of my best friendships came through UD track and field practice. So I'm just incredibly thankful to be a part of this with you as someone who was around all 10 of these teams because I got to know a lot of great people through the program.
And so, what do you think is going to happen with the team of the 2020s?
Well, we'll see how many All-Americans Anna can rack up, and then we'll go from there. No, I'm really excited to see what Coach Dick can do going into a new decade.
Well, that is the end of the team of the 2010s, the University of Track and Field Team of the Decade. It's been a lot of fun. Wish we had more track and field stuff to talk about, but we'll have to do that on our own time. Until the Decade Team of the 2020s, I'm Kevin McGurk, here along with
Matt Barber.
And thank you for joining us all these weeks. Thank you again, and we hope to see you in 10 years.